Thank you, audience, for being so supportive and really attentive. It was right that somebody said speak up. That was good. We decided with Alexander, the artistic director of the Marylebone Theatre, that we would not amplify our voices this afternoon. There is a kind of crisis of amplification in the industry at the moment. At the end of last week in the Stage newspaper, amplification in theatres was the leading story. But one of the things about Rudolf Steiner is that he had some very strong opinions about theatre and speech and voice and so forth. And Alexander felt very strongly that we should be modelling the use of voice without the aid of electronic amplification. So, it's a revolution. Something's happening. What do you think, Harriet, about amplification and its applications?
Well, one of the things that happens is that people think if they're amplified, they can work less hard, and actually that's not quite true. You've still got to project. And I've only ever been microphoned once.
Really?
Yeah, so I've avoided this issue. Once I worked with a Baroque orchestra who refused for me to be mic'd, even though I was speaking to a 3,000-seater. Because music carries it was an opera house, and the music carried, but they didn't want to have an electronic voice and non-electronic acoustic old instruments. So I went along with it, and it was very hard work. That's the extreme end of the spectrum, where there's so much effort being put into being heard. You feel you're shouting everything, and you can't use any nuance, and you can't use any subtlety or changes of tone. But my pride says I was trained to be able to do that, so bloody well I'm going to do it. And it is, there are things that you're robbed of when you have to shout, but in so many theatres I've been in recently, they're in a small space, and there's absolutely no need to amplify. I can see if you've got a song or you're speaking against music or so, yes. But most of these are like three-handers in a small theatre, and you can see this tape going up their neck. You go, why?
Yeah. It's sort of epidemic at the moment. Anyway, we're not doing that, so so if you can't hear us, tell us.
Yeah.
I think more people probably should do that during a performance in a theatre. But what they tend to do is take photos and eat loudly. Or in the case of the couple in New York watching Betrayal, make love. Or one woman pleasured herself. Anyway, then.
Oh my God!
No, it's in the paper. The things people do in theatres other than watch the play. Harriet, when did you fall in love with acting and theatre? What was did you have a sort of a feeling that the genius was knocking on the door?
It's funny, isn't it? There are lots of splintered moments. I think one of the moments must be at school when I was 12 or 13. I think when you're, I'm sure this is a common feeling, that when you're young and you feel unimportant and unheard and uninteresting, and then someone gives you a part in a play and suddenly everybody's laughing at you and listening to you and talking about you afterwards and saying you were great. And really that was the first time I got that kind of a feedback. And it wasn't even spoken feedback. I could feel it as I was on stage. I felt, I've got you under my control, in a way that I've never felt in any other department of my life. So that became the place where I looked for that kind of connection that also, so you were connecting, but you weren't you were dodging recognition, you were, nobody was going to pin you down, something like that. And it came while I was at school at a period of my life that was when things were going very badly at home. My parents were splitting up and I was sort of very much not in a good place, and this was the one place where I felt, I've got my own thing I can do. You know.
Was there someone who pointed at you and said, you can do this, and pulled you, like a teacher or a director? Or...
Not really. I mean, yes, actually the head teacher after that show, where I only had a small part, they weren't going to trust me with the big part, she said, you're a natural.
Oh, wow.
And I remember hearing natural and thinking, that's a good thing to be. And then it was a long time before I went to drama school or carried on with a proper career or anything. So, but it was just, I think, if you get anybody feeding that back to you at an early stage, and you've got an inkling of wanting to do it, it sets you off.
And that feeling, as a young person, the feeling while one is actually on stage, that the energy in the room has shifted, and one is carrying the story at that moment, it's fatal.
Yeah.
I mean, actors really chase that feeling. It's like the first taste of champagne with that view and that sunset.
Yeah.
Every drink, you try and get that feeling back.
It's very seldom comes back exactly that way, does it? But suddenly it's hard work.
But what about poetry, which has really played a very significant part in your life, your whole career, your life? You love poetry. When did that happen? Do you remember?
I don't have a moment when that happened, but I just and I didn't get that kind of feedback in terms of this is something you should be concentrating on in your English literature exams, or it was no sort of, it wasn't that. I think it was via Shakespeare that I became obsessed with words and rhythms and rhymes and resonances and all of that. So I was I think I wasn't as daunted by reading verse because I had played a part that spoke in a certain way. And therefore,
didn't Stevie Smith come to your school?
Stevie Smith came to our school, yes, she did. And so did Michael Horowitz, and so did Brian Patton. And I don't know, it was rather a trendy school. And those were trendy when I was young. And Stevie Smith was very curious, very eccentric in her appearance. And she sang her verses in a sort of out-of-tune, cracked voice, and seemed just wonderfully eccentric and off the wall. And I think I'm a musician manqué, if anything. I think in a different life I might have been a musician, and I respond to music first and foremost in anything. So the music in verse is what comes to me, the music in acting. And there was something about her sort of atonal kind of crackpot kind of delivery that spoke to me in some way. So that's often what's led me into poems. And then I started getting a love for the particularity of words, but really because I work with the great master Shakespeare,
And you mentioned Cicely Berry, legendary voice teacher. When did you first encounter her? Was that at the Royal Shakespeare Company?
I was a late starter in every way, yes. I went to drama school a bit late. I got into the RSC when I was already 30, but I looked much younger and was playing the Juve roles, and so I got 10 years grace because everybody thought I was much younger than I was, because I'd been chipping away all those years, but nobody had noticed me, so they all thought, oh gosh, she's a newcomer. And I think as soon as you go to the RSC, or when you got there in those days, there were classes, dare I say it, here we are. And I'd been in rep, which we sadly don't have any longer, where I'd sort of fallen on my face and learnt about audiences and learnt about different types of parts. And I'd done a bit of Shakespeare in rep. And then that was it. And what I loved about Cicely Berry was, because I'd been told from year dot at school and at drama school that I had a problem with my voice, that it's naturally very quiet and it's naturally a bit breathy, and I had to work on it. And it's not like my comfort zone wasn't at drama school my voice. It was always more my body. I was good physically. And so when I went to the Shakespeare company, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be, I'm not going to match up to how you're supposed to speak when you do Shakespeare. And she completely completely went the opposite way and said, it's your voice we're working on. We're not trying to make you sound like anybody else. And that was so liberating and so totally important that I thought, right, okay, I'll never like my voice. Nobody likes their voice, do they? Is anybody here who likes their voice? Anyway, so she liberated me there and said, it's, so you sort of worked through your voice to what you were saying and what you were and who you were talking to, and you stopped listening to the sounds you were making, which is what Alfred Brendel's saying. Alfred Brendel, for anyone who doesn't know, is a great concert pianist who died last year, and he wrote poetry as well, and one of the poems was about exactly that knife edge in performance where you mustn't indulge your own love of the music and your emotions when you're playing something. You've got to be so disciplined that you have the emotion but you don't drown it, and you let the other people, the audience, feel it. And that metaphor is the same for playing the piano or for acting. And so she just said, it was all about what are you saying, who are you talking to, what's the story, breathing and letting the words come. And then John Barton really helped with the structure and recognizing structure and antithesis and all these things that he called the Shakespeare's instructions to an actor. They're sort of clues within the text that help you get the meaning across. That's really all it's about. What are you trying? What's the meaning? And which is different from poetry recitals, which are more about letting the meaning hang in the air. Maybe there isn't a forward motion in terms of plot. You're just, it's a little gem of a moment that you're describing in words. And then other things that are very narrative and, tell a story, which are more dramatic. But with the plays, the words are the engine that gets your particular crisis or love or emotion that you're going through in that moment. They are the engine for that to get across to an audience, and so they become very active, that you never hover around on something. Even a soliloquy is an active part of the action. So with Shakespeare, his words are his actions. It's not like I'm going to stop now and give you a speech. That is the action.
Right. So was John Barton directing, or was he running verse classes alongside Cicely's voice?
He was doing both, and I did work with him as a director, and he was actually infuriating because he was so obsessive, and he would work from 9 in the morning to midnight if he had his way. You had to get very strong stage management. So the actors need a break. He was nutty. And also the room was full of smoke because he didn't care about non-smoking. So you walk into this absolutely asphyxiating atmosphere. So he wasn't my favourite director, but he was a wonderful masterclass giver and teacher.
And would he use sonnets?
Sonnets was his mainstay. I mean, in fact, he used to sort of take me around as a sort of performing monkey at his masterclasses all over the world. I went to lots of different countries with him, and for one of them, one of the tours, I had to learn 23 speeches, pretty much all of them by men. So I gave my Lear and my Falstaff and my Bottom and my Leontes, So he taught through soliloquies, speeches, mainly, occasionally two-hander pieces. But you really can learn an awful lot from just a sonnet, because it's so compacted. You can get so much information out of a sonnet, and without the burden of characterizing, which might get in the way.
So what was your breakthrough role from those 10 years of being slightly protected? What did they give you that really cracked it open for you?
You mean at the RSC?
I do.
Well, I was thrown in pretty much the deep end, playing Helena in All's Well That Ends Well, which is a massive part. And it was on the main stage, which then was acoustically even less friendly than it is now. And I was with Peggy Ashcroft, who, if anyone knows, was like sort of, the long line that went back, Edith Evans, there's a sort of line that goes back, isn't there? And I thought, my God, here am I. And I hadn't, at that point, even met John Barton. So it was really just Cicely Berry and instinct. And I think that I did have an instinct, again, through music, because some of Helena's speeches are very hard to grasp. They're kind of elusive speeches. Even when she's talking to the audience, she doesn't quite confess what's really going on, because she's ashamed of her feelings. And so you kind of find all that when you stand up and do it. So this is what I was saying earlier about we learn from doing it. And you can be your own teacher with some guidelines from gurus like John Barton, but actually you will only absorb it when you stand up and put it to the test. So that was my breakout role, in the sense that I remember very vividly sitting in the green room during the preview, the tech, before we'd gone on, and my leg was going, and I said, it's okay, I can get on a bus to the station, then I can go on a train to Scotland, I can hide in, nobody will find me, and I really, really, really seriously was going to do a runner.
Stephen Fry did that.
Stephen Fry runner, because I just had, there was no anchor, but that's when you say breakout, it's those moments when you go, I'm going to do it, or I'm not going to do it, and I just committed to doing it, and it is sink or swim. It's like throwing someone in the ocean and they either drown or they paddle and get to the other side.
I mean, you've worked with Shakespeare an awful lot, including that run of male parts that you played at the Donmar, but you've worked with some pretty amazing living writers as well. Do you have a sense of, I haven't seen Hamlet, but do you have a sense of Shakespeare, the man? You know the words so well.
Oh, it's so frustrating, isn't it? I try and ask that question when I have dialogues with him occasionally. I mean, that goes back to my first year at Stratford, when I was living very near the church where he was buried. And I rather fancifully used to sort of call out to the night stars and say, William, how do I say this line? I really, he was so near and yet so far, and I think that's it. He is so near and yet so far. He was this individual man who lived and breathed for 53 years, and he's also, he's all of ours. And it's so difficult to kind of pinpoint the actual man, to hear his voice, to think what he thinks. So I love that speech of Hamlet to the players, because that gives you a bit of an idea of what he was saying, to what he believed in. But it's the impossible trees from that poem. It's just the dream, and we'll never know what he was really like. No,
but the miracle is that you can go back to those parts and that language and know it for the first time.
Yeah. Completely.
It never jades.
Completely, because as you grow and you change, it means something different to you. We did Julius Caesar back in 2012, then we repeated it in 2016, and we're doing it again this year. And it's going to be completely different. Wow. We're doing the same production, I'm playing the same part.
Brutus,
but playing Brutus in 2026, 10 years after Trump first got elected, is going to feel very different. from when we first did it. So that's a particular play that is you know, shapes itself in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of situations, and never loses its truth.
Would be wonderful to see the Shakespeare play about Trump, wouldn't it?
Oh, would it? Yeah.
Well, hopefully it would be funny, as well as terrifying, but with a very bloody ending, or not. No, I don't wish that upon him.
It could be.
I just want justice. That's all I want.
Exactly.
And what about other poets? You see, that this is the thing that fascinates me, coaching younger actors as well, especially around things like vowels and really breaking the shackles into a really expressive style of acting, which is not. That's what I think is you know, on the wires one hears talk that the drama schools feel no longer able to guarantee the teaching of craft, the craft of the release of speech into other dimensions.
Yeah.
But it isn't. I mean, I'm not. It's not really a question I'm forming it, but it's clear to me that poet dramatists, or dramatists who have a conscious relationship to the relishing of spoken language, that they are the ones who seem to certainly survive the test of time, but also to have something to say about what's happening now, even though they wrote it, 50 years ago.
I think there is something in that poetry is a, if you like, it's a deep art form, isn't it? It's deep and it's broad and it's elusive in the right sort of way, in that you can't pin it down, and that's in the nature of poetic writing, and therefore it arguably can be interpreted in different times and different situations and different languages even, though I don't quite understand how Shakespeare works in various other languages, but he obviously does. And obviously, I think of something like, the disciplines of, I was thinking of Hamilton, the musical, which I saw the original in New York, and as I was watching it, I thought, the disciplines that these guys are using, the verbal dexterity, the rhymes and chimes, the wit, the speed, the long phrases, and the articulation. These are all things that we learn or need to learn to speak Shakespeare. And these guys are musical theatre actors and have learnt exactly the same disciplines. So in a way, if a drama school is frightened of teaching Shakespeare, but you are going to do, Sweeney Todd, then you're not actually dodging that particular set of skills at all. You're just frightened of something that you think is, elitist, class-bound, complicated, old-fashioned, whatever the prejudices that are out there are. But
it's a bit of a problem, though, if theatricality becomes cancelled in the theatre. I mean,
that's a very good point. And people love it, don't we? We love, people still go to opera, which is actually, sometimes when we were being taught with Patsy Rodenberg, who's another great teacher, sometimes, and I nearly did it with these guys, we were encouraged to sing, to sing a poem or a speech, so that however untuneful the song is, there is something about the exercise of stretching your lungs and belting it out that disinhibits you in a good way, and accesses sensations that you don't get when you're just going, come on then. Well, where were you on the night of, which is what we're mostly required to do on the small screen.
Your small screen stuff, Ted Lasso, Succession, obviously The Crown. I mean, the list is endless. You've had an astonishing run of Emmy nominations just in recent years. What are the headlines for you about the difference in approach for you between working on a great poetic theatre text and the little bitty 2-3 page scenes that we get that you don't in the end know whether they'll use or not. Or...
That's true. But it's still the text, it's still the writing that attracts me to a project. And yeah, it's still the writing. And because a good modern writer is still particular. It's something to do with particularity and not generalized writing that appeals to me. And I can't pinpoint it or analyze it, but I did a recent TV show that hasn't come out yet, where I loved the script, I loved the writer, and I loved the actors, but I said to my agent, I don't know whether I want to do it because the part's not very interesting. And then my agent sort of persuaded me, and I did it, and I found, because it was so well written, this seemingly uninteresting character on the surface suddenly had masses of playable layers underneath a seemingly boring conversation. And that's good writing. And I mean, I can't analyze it. If I could, I'd put it in a bottle and do it myself, but it's just, you can tell the difference. But it's the same thing. It's a very different discipline to act, a TV comedy to a Shakespeare tragedy, obviously. Very different bits of your equipment are needed. But it's still a sort of intuitive response to language that's happening somehow.
I know you've brought a handful of poems, but I can't help thinking that we should try and broaden the conversation out now.
Don't need more poems.
And just, I think, Megan, have we got a hand mic? We'd love to have questions. And Theo, could you put a little bit more light on the house, please? Just a little bit more. Thank you.
There's a voice.
Central School of Speech and Drama. I am available. No, I am. Actually, I'm a tutor at the Actors Centre. So
yes.
There's that. So if you have a question you'd like to share with Harriet, please make your hand very visible, because we're still... Yes, there. Can you be brave and yell, or do you need a mic?
Right.
Be brave.
I'd really love to know what that school play was and what your part was.
Did you hear that? What was the school play, and what was the role that Harriet played in the school play?
I'm ashamed to say I can't remember the name of the play. But do you remember those French's edition blue and white scripts with a diagram of the drawing room and the lamp and the sofa and the French windows? Yeah, it was one of them. and my character was called Cowslip. And I had a very short scene where I had to come into the room with a basket of eggs. And they said, "What have you got there, Cowslip?" And I said, "Basket." And they said, "We can see that, but what's in it?" "Eggs." Yeah. Who are they? And it went on like that. I had one monosyllables, and I don't think I was vital to the plot. But anyway, that was it. Thanks for even caring.
But if from those clues anyone can identify the play, please...
I don't think you'll ever
please put
read
your hand
it
up.
or hear it.
Yes, at the back there. Yeah. Yes, there's a mic coming. Which
practitioners would you say have inspired your craft most through your acting career?
Most practitioners, people, in other words, other actors really, more than directors.
Well, Sis Berry you've named. But...
Yeah. I think, if anybody's heard of him, I hope you have, William Gaskill, Bill Gaskill. Very scary man, taught at various drama schools, but I think him and Frank Whitten, who was the vice principal at my old drama school, Lambda, and Matt Stafford Clark and Phyllida Lloyd, they're all directors, but they're directors who teach. I hear their voices, if I take on a part, I often hear something that Bill or Frank or Max or Phyllida told me that I've never forgotten. I don't really learn from. You can admire. I'll alter that, because I was going to say you don't really learn from, or I don't have many mentors who are actors, because actors are all going to do their thing. You can't copy what another actor does. But I will say that one of the things I think is important for young actors to do, I mean, if you're learning to make films, if you're learning to paint, or if you're learning to play the trumpet, you go and watch professionals do it, and you learn from doing that. I don't think many actors, partly because of the cost, go to see enough other plays. And I think if you go to see plays, you learn not, I'm going to do it like that, but you learn why you like a certain performance and why you don't like another performance, and you hone your own tastes, and you realize what it is you like about. I'm going to try and do what that person does to other people. I'm not going to try and do it like them, but I'm going to try and do that thing they do, to the effect that they have. And it's usually with me to do with knowing that they're thinking. You know, you do see some people, you think, if I jumped up on stage and said, "What are you thinking?" They go, "I'm thinking about where I'm going tonight after the show." You know, where I love to get up on stage and think somebody's absolutely vibrantly in the moment thinking, and that's what I hope to do.
I was 16 years old when I saw John Gielgud and Ralph Richardson in No Man's Land by Harold Pinter, and I was a teenager. I had no clue, but my God, I wanted to know how they'd made this. It was an entire world happening, and you couldn't see any acting. There was no acting. They just existed. They were in that world, like a hologram. It was just real, and I couldn't. It was just mind blowing how utterly transporting it was. But I didn't understand a single word what was said.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great
questions. Yes, there's a hand at the very back there. So yes.
Thanks, Harry. Hi, I'll probably stick with the tradition of not using the mic.
Here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks for today. It's been great. I've got a question to draw on your experience in the theatre with Shakespeare plays. We are working actually from this house with an ensemble of young actors, and we were looking at Twelfth Night in a circle just before Christmas, and I realised that so much of the text is so hilarious to an audience that understands things which we might not understand anymore. For instance, plays on sound, or original pronunciation, or jokes which just, and I tested this by asking the actors in the room, do you know what this? Do you know what he's saying here? Do you know what this is? And they were very honest and generous. They said, no, actually, I don't know what the joke is. So I'm wondering, to go forward and to create work, especially Shakespeare's plays, how do we honour the text? So I'm one of those people who like changing the text. But when there's things in there which are just definitely lost on today's audience.
Yeah.
And Harry might have answered that with your previous thing. You feel it or something.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, how do I work with our actors and convey these meanings? Just when you could have something like Malvolio, when he reads the C's for use and for T's, or we hear cuts. But if we go back to the pronunciation that I've learnt about, which might have been original pronunciation, her C's, her U's, and her T's.
Yeah.
Then the joke becomes funny.
Yeah.
But we don't have that knowledge anymore.
I think I know exactly what you're saying, and I think each production, each director will choose what tack they take and whether they are going to honour the text, because perhaps you don't have to honour every single word. Perhaps you do have to admit defeat and say this joke is never going to work in a million years. I remember having to get as civil as an orange across Beatrice says in Much Ado About Nothing. I mean, and it's all to do with Seville and civil, and how you do that, you don't. But I just kind of enjoyed how silly it was, as civil as an orange just felt silly, and so I sort of sang it out, and hoped for the best, and I knew that I couldn't ever land the joke as Shakespeare intended, and there are lots of things we cannot land as Shakespeare intended because we're living in a different time. But this also comes from Twelfth Night, my very favourite. For Sir Andrew, if he have so much blood in his liver as will clog the foot of a flea, I'll eat the rest of the anatomy. Well, I mean, you don't have to know much to understand that. And, it's full of very funny lines without, there's plenty to laugh at, usually not in the mouth of the jester or the funny guy. They're usually totally difficult to get hold of. But so many other characters say funny things.
But don't forget that the actors mustn't know it's funny in the first place. They've got to just attack the line, and don't worry, because there's 3 more jokes coming in the next line. If the audience don't get that one, just keep going.
Yeah.
Because actually, we overthink this. We over-caretake the audience's experience. And we have to remember that we mustn't be finding what we're about to say funny or not funny. It's just the next line. I mean, obviously, if Aguchi is trying to be funny, then that's a character thing.
It's when they're the jester and the joke, when they're the clown. I think those are the sorts of lines that come up a lot. And there is a sort of duty to be funny, and that's very difficult. You have to just ask all the other actors on stage to pretend you're being funny. It helps the joke. Certainly with Beatrice and Benedict, it's so unfair because Benedict's much funnier than Beatrice. But you just have to have some very friendly, supportive actors laughing at all your jokes.
But she also gets more power than Benedict. She gets to undercut. Kill Claudia is one of the greatest lines in the canon, because Benedict can't deal with it.
That's true.
But then there are modern writers who write lines. I mean, Harold Pinter was famous for writing lines that the actors would say, "Harold, what does this mean?" And he would say, "I'm afraid the author has no further information." So, I mean, just because a line gets written by someone modern doesn't mean we understand it, but we've still got to find an honest way to say it and keep the thing moving. I think we overthink these things. Let's have another question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. As a layperson, being neither a poet nor an actor, I understand that poetry is something that can be recited universally by anyone and it can be done very congruently. What I'm interested in is understanding from you, how did you negotiate this route of being an actress to embody and to take on the persona of various male characters in Shakespeare?
Can you repeat the question, please?
How did Dame Harriet find her way to portraying some of the male characters in Shakespeare, given all her previous experience?
Humanity. I mean, men are human too.
Well, that's enough. Outrageous.
There is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted all other, I can relate to that.
Sure, but you see, I mean, today what seems to be the case is that an actor should only play roles commensurate with their own background and gender.
That's I see what you're saying.
It's a slightly different.
There are 2 opposite things at work at the moment, where on the one hand we're opening up the casting possibilities in Shakespeare and other things to different types of people than have traditionally played them. So that's the one branch. On the other branch, you've got some very sort of strict policing of who's allowed to play what. And I tried to square that circle by saying, if I am depriving somebody underrepresented of playing a part, I'd better not do it, I'd better open it up to them. But if I'm doing the opposite and opening casting possibilities to people who don't get the chance, then I'll do that. Do you see what I mean? So that for instance, somebody was sort of slightly cross with me for playing an Irish character. And I thought, no, sorry, Irish actors are not underrepresented. A lot of Irish actors play British parts, so I'm not taking a part away from an Irish actress any more than I'm taking a part away from any number of people who went up for the part. That's the tough game that we're in. But if I was going to play a part that should be played by and could be played by a good disabled actor, then I won't. Do you see what I mean? It's really whether they're underrepresented or not. But as a principle, I don't think it works as a principle to say you've got to be 80 years old and African to play that part. You know, I think that's what actors do. We play all sorts of things we aren't.
Yes, there's a hand there, and then we'll come down here.
You said before about direction and about risk. And I was just thinking, if you're doing TV or film, if the director doesn't like what you've done, he says, cut, and do it again. When you go on the stage, it's you and you alone on stage. Have you ever been tempted, I mean, what you've done in rehearsal, to say, actually, I know how to do that, and it'll be something totally different when you're on the stage?
I absolutely know what you're saying, and I think we all feel, I think a lot of actors would say that they will nod a lot and say yes, yes in rehearsals, and then get up and do just what the hell they want. On the other hand, if you've got to have co-conspirators, you can't go your own way in a play with lots of other people who are playing the play that they rehearsed with that director and go in a completely different direction. Partly because you'll probably die the death if you're not, you know, you won't actually, your choices won't make sense if you're not playing in harmony with everybody around you. But I think in another way, when you put it in a certain way, sort of go your own way, I can't remember, but certainly there are negotiations you can make in rehearsal, and you can persuade a director of your point of view by standing up and doing it in a certain way. There are lots of tricks we have to play, so that you can say yes, yes, no, that's a good idea, and then you do it sort of how they said, but adding in whatever it is you want to do, and they'll at the end of it they go, that's perfect. That's what I meant, you know. So you can play lots of tricks, but there's no point really going against the grain. I don't think, you know, really going out on a limb in a production.
Do you like directors as a thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they're like parents. Bad directors are the worst things you can possibly encounter, and good directors are the great white hope. It's just, I love good directors so much. I mean, they've taught me so much, and I couldn't do anything without a good, you know. I don't think we can do it on our own, but there are some pretty poisonous ones as well, which do a lot of damage. It's a difficult job because a lot of directors don't see one another work, so they don't really know what it is other people do, and they set their own rules and do things their own way. But you know, they're geniuses at best. I love directors because they are for me, they're my means to the audience. I mean, I can think whatever I think, and they're going, it's not coming over, I'm not getting it. They're preparing me for what an audience might see or hear, and they're putting me in the right place on stage to communicate what I need to, and they're in charge of the whole story in a way that I'm not. I'm only in charge of my bit. So I really, really need directors, and I don't object to directors' theatre, but there is a musical analogy there as well. There are conductors who the orchestra completely ignore and just watch one another because they know he's you know, we all know how to play this piece, you go away. And then there are other conductors who completely create the evening, you know. And the players know which is which very quickly. They sniff them out. Yeah. And
what about you and directing? Have you done
not interested. Look at me today. I was absolutely floundering. I don't have that bone in my body. I don't think. Not really.
When you're on a set making a telly or a film where directors are almost unavailable as a rule. What do you do then when you're not sure about a line or a beat or a look, and you can't really access that directorial hand on your shoulder? What do you do?
It's very difficult. I mean, I have to say, I didn't go on screen until I was 30. And I don't know how really young people who get pitched into a big telly, how they, it's sink or swim time, isn't it? If you're playing the lead, the director will spend a lot of time with you. I'm usually not. So I just rely on everything I've learned over my life, really, and try and pick up the flavour. I have occasionally asked if I'm being pitched into something, when they've been up and running for a month or two, and I've asked to see what they've shot so far, or bits of what they've shot so far, so that I get any idea of what the style and tone of the whole thing is. Mm-hmm. Because you don't always know, and that's very helpful if you can get a little bit of a view. But no, you're right. What you hope is that you've covered a lot of conversation and discussion before you even start, when the director is available and they're doing pre-preparation stuff. And then that's probably kissed you goodbye and probably won't talk to you again, while you're actually filming. Or not much. And usually a director will come up and say, look, this, little tweak here and tweak there, and they'll give you an idea if it's really not what they want. Yeah.
I heard a little Edward Fox story the other day that he was on a set of a TV show. What's the name of Madonna's ex-husband who directs? Guy Ritchie. He was on a Guy Ritchie show, and he said to they lined the shot up, and he said to the first assistant director, where's the director? I'd like a word with the director. And the first assistant said, well, he's in his trailer. He directs from his trailer. And Edward said, if he wants to know where I am, I'll be in mine. Questions? There was a couple of hands down here, front row.
Yeah, fine.
Nice and loud so they can hear you.
Yes, of course. Fine. Two questions about one subject, transition. You spoke, obviously today, for example, of forensically taking something into pieces and then reforming it. You and your experience, tell me how you transition from a lot of thoughts, what's a play spinning, to actually delivering, and as a logical for you. And secondly, your early days as an actress, before you went to the university, as you about this time, the transition from becoming an average person in the street to becoming an actress, from earning a wage to say, now I'm doing this job. Did it happen quite clear for you?
I think I'll answer. The second question was the transition from being a non-actor, really, and not a regular person in the street who wasn't earning their living by acting, to earning a living by acting. And I had a very smooth development in the earnings category. I never earned anything much until I did my first telly and began to earn some money. But I was very used to not earning money in this job, and I never let it affect my sense of status or my sense of worth. But that was kind of much easier when in the 1970s and 80s than it is now, I think. You didn't feel, you didn't feel absolutely hopeless or helpless if you weren't earning a lot of money.
So the first question was, what's it like for Harriet to go from the analytic pre-rehearsal or pre-commitment phase of creating a role into the actual stepping out and trying stuff out in the room?
Yeah, I think everybody's very different that way. I do a lot of thinking and then get up and I think that the big transition moment is learning a part. because I think there is every difference between this in rehearsal and this in rehearsal. And that's the transition that just hard slog at home, working out how to learn a part. And I've got lots of tricks that I have, and little mnemonics I have, and sort of emotional memory tricks that we all, we've all got our own personal way, but they're like the scaffolding, while you're building it, and then you take the scaffolding away, you take the book away, and then you're really, that's the transition. And it is a feedback situation as well, because in that halfway stage, what other people are feeding back into you is sort of consolidating the stuff that you're building. But that's the big one. When the words become mine, they're no longer the writer's or somebody else's, they're mine, because I've learned them, they're in my skin. That's the big transition moment, yeah.
Well, look, it's getting on, time's getting on. I think we should wind this up now, because Dame Harriet's going to go out to the foyer, and there are some wonderful books for sale which she will also sign, and maybe some of you can carry on having the conversation with her there. I want to say, on behalf of not just the New Actors Centre, but the Marylebone Theatre, Alexander and Adrian, and the whole team, thank you so much for giving us your theatre for the afternoon. Thank you all for what you've done, which has helped to raise some money so that this idea can flourish after a terrible period of collapse. And that's, if you want to know more about that, you can go to the YouTube channel Actor at the Centre or the New Actors Centre, and you'll find out an amazing tale of modern corruption. But we're back, we're here. It's thanks to you that we're going to stay here, and thanks to Adrian and Alexander that the imagination is here to keep this idea going of a home from home for actors, and for the craft of acting, and for the love of acting, and the honour of the profession. This thing was started by Clive Swift and Dame Sheila Hancock and Tony Hopkins, and equity bought a building. Sir Lawrence Olivier, damn it, was the first patron. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, is what I'm trying to say. But it's not over. It's a new beginning. You, by showing up today, have made yourselves an indivisible part of that. So we thank you. I thank Dame Harriet Walter for a wonderful Shakespeare.